Championship Wrestling, bringing you great wrestling action sanctioned by the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance.
Folks, yes, it is again. From Crockett to Chaos, and we are back. Thank you so much for the groundswell of support for the show. I mean, I am not lying. I am humbled by how much support I have gotten for this show. I mean, it is unbelievable. Thank you all. It seems like a lot of people really give a shit about this wrestling from 7 years ago. And I'm excited about it, man, because I'll tell you what, my biggest thing that really kept me up at night as a kid, as a fan, was when WCW died. I just never felt like I got over it. I know that sounds so weird, but as a wrestling fan, I really, truly had a hard time with it, because I think even at that young age, I knew that, like, you know, a world with just the WWF, which would end up being WWE a year later, was not a good world to live in. And I really loved WCW. I really, truly did. And jumping back into the time machine to 1988, before yours truly was even alive, folks, we're finally getting into that. And I felt old, okay? I feel like an old man. And we're talking about shit where I was not even a thing yet. But, buddy, you got to talk about what led us to that big purchase in November of 1988. And it was indeed Jim Crockett Promotions first, and they were just fumbling all over the place. You know, the last episode we were with Jim, and he was incredible. We were kind of all over the place, but, you know, the main narrative I wanted to hit was how big that first Clash of Champions was. And we get the idea of how big that is when we find out that the Clash of Champions numbers were phenomenal at the time. And in fact, the rating that ends up coming out drew a 5.8 rating, 12.6 share, and that roughly comes out to 2,56100. So basically about 2.6 million homes watched it. All you need to know is that's massive numbers. Flair Sting topped at a 7.1 rating, just to give you an idea. At the zenith of the Attitude Era, I mean, that was still a good number. Like, that wasn't failing. That is incredible, especially from 1988, and especially for the same day that WrestleMania 4 happened. So, huge success off that. So you would think, oh, well, then business is going to be great, right? No. And it's a very odd source that I got it from, but I got a good idea of what happened to Jim Crockett Promotions finances and why it just seemed like they could not ever come back from the finances that they did. And it was from Jim Cornette and his old podcast. You know, I tried to brush up like, hey, listen, this guy's a great resource for the history, and he was there, right? And he had a great little blurb, and basically the gist of it was that all the way back at the start of 88, the TV schedules for tapings changed, and the scale of them changed. So what they would do is basically TVs would be done on small levels in high school gyms, college gyms, just little places, just to, you know, lower costs, because it wasn't a live event. And then they would really promote the live events, the big shows like Greensboro and Charlotte, those big markets, for the shows that weren't televised. That was the old school way to do it. It worked for a million years. Well, for whatever reason, in 88, Jim Crockett decided to move the TVs to these huge buildings, no advertised matches though, and it was just very disjointed. And you would have these weird travel schedules where at the end of the day, you would just be spending more money. You'd go from like Miami to Atlanta for TV, then from Atlanta to like fucking LA to here to there. He spread himself so thin, and his television schedule was so ridiculous that it was like, what are we doing? We're spending so much money on production here, and we're not getting enough live gate. You got to remember, this is not now. And even back then, TV wrestling didn't make you money. The classic thing was like you went to TVs and you only got $500. You got like this bullshit deal. because it wasn't about that. Different world. So Jim Cornette's big belief is that change, that big change where it became a TV promotion first, failed because the TV aspect of it just wasn't there and the money for it was not there. We then, of course, get into May of 1988, and we've got, we talked about Barry Windham turning heel last show, all that stuff. We have the beginnings of Varsity Club against the Garvins, and this is just phenomenal shit. I've been posting on different socials, mainly Threads is where I'm putting a lot of these clips when I'm, doing this research. Kevin Sullivan was a creepy motherfucker, guys. He's cutting promos about Precious everywhere. He's talking to Jimmy about how I'm going to steal your girl. It's some heavy shit here, and it leads us to the infamous Tower of Doom match. And whoa, buddy. And I mean, we promoted the shit out of this. I've watched weeks and weeks and weeks of TV, right? And I have seen nothing but promotion for the Tower of Doom. I've seen Jim Ross talking about, I've seen the Tower of Doom, all this shit, right? And it's just ridiculous. It's all like Kevin Sullivan promos about he went to fucking Asia and he ate the fucking monkey brains, and it's amazing, folks. You gotta just go watch this shit. It was just another level, and it shows you too what a different time. Like, you could just get away with fucking, like, I went over to Asia and I did all, it's fucking unbelievable. You guys gotta go fucking check it out. Throughout this, though, even as it looks like, the ship is pretty righted and not doing too bad, we got a lot of unhappy people because we've got balloon payments being missed as early reported as of June 6th. So, like, even in May, right? Like, because if it's coming out in June 6th, it's been going on for a while. So even in May with, like, Kevin Sullivan and all these people. And now, granted, I don't know who didn't get paid. Now, from what I understand, I know that the Powers of Pain were part of that, I believe. There's a lot of that shit. A lot of the guys ended up walking not too long from now. Were the ones that were involved. And it's interesting because this feels so much like the end of ECW. And you think about the scale. It's like, good God, Crockett was this much larger production than ECW. And they were having these problems. And it's just proof, as big as you can be, if you don't have your shit together with the financials and the booking, the booking's all over the place. So it's kind of, it looks like they're just trying to, like, patch a hole in a fucking boat in the middle of the ocean, and it's just not working. And that leads to frustration. I was very interested to see that one of the people that were upset was actually Dr. Death, who ends up staying in the company for a little bit. He ends up having a run here with the Varsity Club. Even apparently he was upset, and then that's why he was doing color at the second Clash of Champions, which we'll get to in a second. So that was strange. I don't know if somewhere along the lines in the middle of the summer, they negotiated and got something going for him. And that was smart. I feel like Dr. Death's one of those huge missed opportunities for everyone in the business, because, man, even into the mid 90s, that guy was a super worker. What a great worker. And he ended up having his best years in All Japan in the early 90s. I mean, unbelievable shit. But you saw glimmers of that here. I mean, there were a lot of job matches he did. He around this time too, it's weird he was unhappy because I unearthed a trios match where he was tagging with Nikita Koloff and fucking Sting. So they had him in that level. So they clearly saw a lot in him. But again, money talks. It's just an interesting situation there. So yes, that was interesting, and obviously that led into the Varsity Club deal, because during the match in the promotion for that Tower of Doom, we see the Garvins get a little bit of assistance from old Dr. Death, which of course will lead to the big swerve. It can't be WCW without a big swerve, and of course that would be Dr. Death joining the Varsity Club. But yeah, old school shit here with the Varsity Club and the Garvins. I loved it. The Tower of Doom match, a total turd, not good at all. Let's look into who was in that match, by the way. So yeah, this is interesting. in the fucking Tower of Doom. 19 minutes, 55 seconds, by the way. The baby faces win. The baby faces being Animal and Hawk, the fucking Road Warriors, Dr. Death, Ron and Jimmy Garvin, and they wrestled Al Perez, Ivan Koloff, Kevin Sullivan, Mike Rotunda, and the Russian Assassin. It's very clear they came out with this shit, right? And they were just like, I don't know. Okay. I don't know what to tell you. We gotta do this. And everyone's like, what the fuck? Al Perez is gonna have to make this fucking shit gimmick work. And of course, the whole gimmick, of course, is ridiculous. Those of you that know the infamous triple cage match that David Arquette was part of, basically same idea here. You fight from the top of the cages down through. It was not put together well. A lot of fucked up shit, a lot of weird stuff. And of course, the whole gimmick of this thing was Precious had the key at the bottom. And of course, she got the baby faces out for the win. I know they thought this was going to be the next War Games, right? Like they were like, hey, we hit a home run with War Games. Everyone's all about it. A year later, let's fucking bring them something else. Tower of Doom. And it was just a turd, man. It was not good. And they didn't fucking kill this thing either. They did a couple of these. And that's crazy, man. That just tells you right there how fucking desperate and just out of touch WCW was for a long time. Yeah. So I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I thought the Tower of Doom, a big part of TV at this time. I mean, they really banked a lot on this thing. I think they really believed like, ooh, this could be a thing, guys. Come on, and it just was not. But before that, we had the second Clash of Champions, Miami Mayhem, June 8th, 1988. We had Barry Windham defending the U.S. title against Brad Armstrong to start. I read about this, and people were very low on it at the time. This was not a bad match, though. I guess a little slow. And also, I guess if you're thinking about it in terms of, like, at the time, very underwhelming. Because Barry Windham was, slotted as, like, this top heel. And Brad Armstrong's just kind of a guy. He wasn't really on TV at the time a lot. Ended up being a decent match. Ronnie and Jimmy Garvin in a tag match against Rick Steiner and Mike Rotunda. Kevin Sullivan in a shark cage. Jim mentioned the last episode they love a good shark cage. He's right. And for whatever reason, this one was not elevated. It was just on the ground. A lot of him screaming at Precious. She's got the key. She's kind of like acting, this is when she was feigning like she was listening to him. We had a lot of fuckery there. Al Perez against Nikita Koloff one-on-one. This was also another one that was whatever. It's funny. Everyone was like, Al Perez was going to be a next guy. And it's like, I don't know, man. He looked like the most wooden motherfucker I've ever seen in my life. And then the main event. Dusty Rhodes and Sting challenging Arn and Tully for the NWA World Tag Titles. Barry Windham makes the big run-in at the end here. Puts the horrid claw on Dusty and somehow cuts him open with it. It is a very weird end to a show. They just sort of like vamp to the back and the graphic for the show happens. And yeah, so apparently this was not very well promoted at all. The only announced national match was the tag title main event. So they were trying to get people to use the mystery gimmick, right? And we've seen this with promotions before, and it failed. They only drew 2,400 people to a 6,000 seat arena. Huge failure there. The rating also was not good. They only got a 4.7 rating with an 8.2 share. So a huge drop off from that first Clash. So you're seeing it. They had lightning in a bottle. That Sting Flair match. And they just couldn't capitalize in a way that they really should have in this one. So a huge drop. And it's like, again, you almost have we have more than a whole rating drop. 5.8 rating for the first one, right? And a 7 rating for the main event in that first show with Sting and Flair, right? So now in the second one, you got a 4.7. I mean, that's horrible. That's horrible. And again, a lot of things happened between then. The Midnight Rider angle was a crash and burn. Sting not winning the world title, I think, hurt it. I think it's very clear that it did. Throughout the years, there's been these rose-colored glasses that, well, it wasn't that big of a deal. Sting won a time limit draw. He was made. That's true. But I think it needed to be an instant, like, okay, we got to go into something else. And I'm not saying he should have just been hot-shotted to the title 2 months later on Clash 2, but I feel like Great American Bash 88 probably should have been that. You know what I mean? We'll get into the build of that as well. Either way, Miami Mayhem, big, big failure for WCW. And this is when we start to get the conversations about sale conversations with Turner. And the tone changes rather quickly. I think it's also interesting going back to that Clash 2. They used the Clash 2 to promote Great American Bash's main event, which would be Lex Luger and Flair, first time ever. And I really forgot that wrinkle. Again, going back and not being from this era as a fan, I didn't really understand the ins and outs, if you will, of what was going on. And so I get it, and there was a lot of buzz from what I've read everywhere. People were very interested in this match. I think they expected it to be, oh, cool. So we made Sting. We're just going to make Luger. So we'll have two big made top guy baby faces. And it just didn't work out like that. They had the whole thing. There was an infamous angle here on Clash 2 as well, where the Horsemen wait for Luger to show up in a limo. He's in a white tux. And of course that means he's going to get busted open. Not as much as I think they wanted, but they beat the shit out of him. And JR's like, holy shit. So they lead to that, right? They're that's the thing about Jim Crockett Promotions. They didn't have a problem with hot angles. The problem was the follow-up with that hot angle. And then that bled into WCW as well. It's a bizarre thing. They could get a match in the ring and get people to care about it. But once that match happened, the finishes just never seemed to pan out. I don't know what the fuck the deal was. But this was no different. They get Luger and Flair in the ring, and literally 2 weeks before they can even get there, one of their top tag teams in the company leaves NWA for the WWF. The Powers of Pain officially jump. June 27th is when the news comes out. And on paper, you would go, okay, like it's not that big of a deal, right? Well, here's the problem. They were supposed to be the guys working your top babyface group, the Road Warriors. They were about to do all these scaffold matches, and this is a classic Dusty stupidity move. And I love Dusty, but this was a stupid thing from his perspective. We're going to put 4 jacked guys up on a scaffold multiple times in a tour for the Great American Bash, and somebody's going to have to do the job. Let's all know, it's going to be the Powers of Pain. So he's asking these fucking 6'3" jacked guys, just take a fucking bump from 15 feet in the air to the ground. 3 times in 2 weeks. So listen, I think Barbarian and Warlord were smart in this equation, and they said, nah, fuck you. I think we're going to go to the other grass over there, WWF. And they did. And right away, they get in an angle with Demolition for the WWF tag titles. And it's like, holy shit. That's what I mean by that is really where the mistakes started to really affect Jim Crockett. Because it's one thing to miss and still keep talent that you miss on, and then you can maybe rejuvenate that talent. But when you fuck up somebody and then they leave to the other guy and they immediately go, oh yeah, these guys are great, it just makes you look bad. It makes you look like, how do you not know what you're doing? You had them over there working your top group and you couldn't figure out, fucking push them. So it looks really bad here. So initially it seemed like, well, it's not going to be that big of a deal, but it really kind of does end up being a big deal. And I think a very clear demarcation line happens here where I think Dusty sees this, and as time goes on and they do keep getting over in WWF, and they have Mr. Fuji and it becomes this thing and they're working Demolition, having good matches. That is, I think, when the seed of the infamous Road Warriors heel turn that happens later kind of starts, because I think to him, he's like, well, shit, I lost them. So now the Road Warriors don't have a big group to wrestle. So we got to like pivot here and figure out what we're going to do down the line. So I really believe that that begins to start having to become an issue. However, in the short term, they're just still going, and they keep riding on to the Great American Bash build here. You got Barry Windham defending the U.S. title against Dusty. You got the Midnights against the Fantastics for the United States tag titles. You got Nikita and Sting this time challenging Arn and Tully for the tag titles. You got, of course, Flair and Luger for the world title. So this is a pretty stacked fucking card. And early on, there's so much hype that old David Meltzer is even saying he thinks this will end up being the biggest money-making non-WWF show in history in America. I'm not sure if it ends up happening that way. I do know the Great American Bash is doing very well. And they did have some issues, I think, in Philadelphia where, let's see here, they had a problem with TV where somewhere lost fucking signal for a while, which again, so WCW, so fucking WCW. Either way though, they had a sold out Baltimore arena, 14,000 fans, huge show. And of course, a lot of people pan this as a really, really good show. You know, Barry Windham and Dusty was a solid match. Again, for its time, definitely, like, you know, really good. Now, probably doesn't hold up for a lot of people, but still very good. I did say that that fucking Tower of Doom was a fucking slice of shit, and that's part of it, right? You're always going to have that. It is what it is. But Flair and Luger was a great match with a terrible finish. Of course, this is the infamous blood finish where the ref stopped the match because Luger was bleeding, and it wasn't really that much blood. And another fucking prime example of Jim Crockett just looking really fucking stupid. And this isn't really his fault, right? It's not like the company's fault. I don't even know if it's Lex's fault. Sometimes you just don't get good blood from whatever happens, whatever happened. Maybe it was too warm. I don't know how it works, right? I don't know. But either way, it didn't go well. It didn't look good. And it was kind of like a fart in church situation, you know? And this is a show that, by the way, had one of the very best tag matches of the time, which was Midnights against the Fantastics. We had Jim Cornette in a straitjacket and shark cage above the ring this time, though. Midnights will win back those United States tag titles. Great match. Even the Arn and Tully against Nikita and Sting match was not a bad match. Very good. That went to a time limit draw, though. So, again, a lot of finishes that just were bullshit here. Barry Windham did beat Dusty, though. Not necessarily clean, but he did beat him. So that's really kind of the only, like, decent finish of this show. Big success, but it just kind of gets marred by the fact that it's slowly coming out the WCW is going to have to sell. Another fun little news article here was in July 25th's issue of The Observer, we had the news that Bam Bam Bigelow has quit the WWF. The schedule was just too much for him. His payoffs weren't there. And let's just be honest, he kind of wasn't a success in his first run in WWF at all. Just didn't work out. So he ends up going away. He will end up coming into what will be at that point the Turner NWA later in the year. He has a match on Starrcade with Barry Windham that is very good. But I thought it was interesting to put that in there. So not just people from Jim Crockett leaving and going elsewhere. There's people in WWF still not happy either. And that's saying a lot because this is, you know, right at the tail end of the monster Hogan run for them. So even then, the grass was not always greener. We finally get it announced as well in July that the first ever SummerSlam is going to happen in August. And buddy, look at this fucking early card. You got Macho Man and Hogan against the Mega Bucks, Andre the Giant and Ted DiBiase. We got Demolition defending their tag titles against the Hart Foundation. So, you know, the Powers of Pain are not fully involved in the big part of television yet, but they will be very, very soon. And yeah, that leads us to an unfortunate story in this time, as during all of this, of course, was the tragic murder of Bruiser Brody in Puerto Rico. And it's very odd because not too long before it happens, you do see, when you look through the Observer, that Dave Meltzer talking about how he really would love Brody to be part of Jim Crockett. He thought that he really fit into that quite a lot. And it's just tragic, obviously the situation in and of itself, but then also the fact that, I mean, here's a guy that was such a big star, and here he is being taken so early in his life in such a senseless way. And, that obviously I don't want to get into the details, but it does feel like I needed to mention that, that does happen in the middle of this. And then, of course, more bad news, and this is for Jim Crockett, that there are huge cash flow issues. And here's when the news starts coming out of the loans that they've had to come out, something of $300,000 at a time to just pay TV stations, cover wrestler pay, and they really are bleeding here. I mean, they're quite literally having to take advances out on advances at this point. And it's finally sort of decreed they're really dead in the water, and that this Turner sale must go through. And that is where we will leave off. I mean, a lot of stuff happening in a very short amount of time. And, again, a lot of the details are that simply Turner just wants the right deal. They don't want to overpay. They don't want to get swindled out of this situation. They want to be given a fair shot at not only getting what they feel is right, and obviously they want wrestling on their network. That was a thing with Ted Turner personally. And however, his financial team is very clearly going, well, okay, but we aren't going to just take this shit on a loss. We can't do that. And they do end up doing that in some way. I do know they keep Jim Crockett on as a fucking consultant and all that. And obviously the details I will have for the next episode. But here we are, guys, after the Great American Bash, even though it was a success, and it was a success. It was a very good show, a lot of interest in Luger Flair. There's a lot of things going off. Sting is still rising. It just seems like the water is just too much to overtake, and they are just taken out by the wayside. And this is it. This is like the dying days of Jim Crockett, and it's a very sad situation. And it's also very bizarre to see on TV because they put up a happy front, right? The TV doesn't really change in this time. Guys leave, obviously. You have Powers of Pain leave. You'll have Ronnie Garvin leave at one point. Obviously, Arn and Tully leave. That's later, and that'll be next episode as well. But that's really the only thing that changes. They did a great job of sort of keeping a happy face, and oh my God, look at the Great American Bash Tour. And it wasn't enough. And I think that's the tragedy. It's like, man, what a story. What a perfect preamble to WCW, though, even for Jim Crockett Promotions. They would have these hot shows and these great gates, and it was for nothing. So, kind of a fucking depressing episode. I mean, I'd love to tell you guys it was like sunshine and daisies at this point for Jim Crockett in the summer of '88. It was not. A lot of guys are starving. A lot of guys are trying to get to the other side of WWF, but that's getting tough. Whoa, buddy. This was the lean years for old Jim Crockett in the final years, in fact. But again, I thank you for joining me on From Crockett to Chaos. A little shorter of a show, obviously. Not having a guest, we don't have as much, back and forth, but I like the flow of this. I do want to continue to bring guests on the show, though. I will have more and more guests. Jim will absolutely be back. What a fucking debut, man. He had like a Megan Bain, Brock Lesnar debut for podcasting, man. He came in, he dominated. Great fucking voice, all that stuff, man. So Jim will be back. I've got a lot of other people that have shown interest. I'll keep that close to my vest. But until next time, go watch some Jim Crockett, man. This stuff is phenomenal. and be good to each other.